The US president has talked up what he calls his environmental leadership in a speech at the White House. Donald Trump says the environment's a top priority for his administration, even as it rolls back protections. Alan Fisher with this report from Washington.
On a day an unusually strong summer storm blew through Washington, Donald Trump talked about his stewardship of the environment.
My administration has made it a top priority to ensure that America is among the very cleanest air and cleanest water on the planet.
Before he became president, he refused to accept overwhelming scientific evidence about climate change, a hoax, he called it, created by the Chinese to harm the US economy. Once elected, one of the first things he did on the environment, withdraw the US from the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement, an international initiative to limit global temperature rises. He says the US, the world's second biggest polluter, is doing a remarkable job, all on its own.
Every single one of the signatories to the Paris Climate Accord lags behind America in overall emissions reductions.
Even as he started revoking environmental protection laws, he insisted they couldn't get in the way of a strong economy. But data from his own Environmental Protection Agency shows the number of bad air days jumped 20% in 2017, the first year of Trump's presidency. A report by the State of Global Air that's backed by several US universities ranks the US as 8th best in the world in terms of particle pollution, something linked to tens of thousands of premature deaths each year. And under Trump's presidency, more than 80 environmental rules and regulations have been repealed, withdrawn or weakened, most of them aimed at reducing air pollution and emissions. This speech, this event, didn't lay out any new plans or proposals by Donald Trump for the environment, which is surprising, given that climate is likely to be one of the hot topics in the next presidential election. Some environmental watchdogs say Donald Trump's actions are actually increasing greenhouse gas emissions and damaging the environment.
What's really clear from this president is he doesn't understand the impact of fossil fuels on our climate, or doesn't care, frankly, and doesn't understand that the energy future is a clean energy future.
Several US government agencies have warned the long-term impact is a threat to US strategic interests. For example, 3 of the 5 most expensive hurricanes have hit the US in the past 2 years, a cost of billions of dollars to the US economy, and a pattern likely to be repeated, especially as a new report suggests a majority of Americans now believe that climate change is affecting their local area, and a third say it's affecting them personally. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, the White House.
So a few hours ago on Al Jazeera, before the president's speech, Hannah Safford joined us. She is a researcher at the University of California at Davis Policy Institute for Energy, Environment and the Economy. And look, she's back with us now on Skype from Davis, California. Hannah, thanks for coming back. Are you feeling any different about the Trump administration and the environment after hearing that speech?
No, that speech was basically exactly what we expected. The speech was triggered by polling showing that climate change and the environment are becoming an increasingly important issue for voters. And so the Trump administration is starting to feel some pressure to demonstrate what they're doing to advance environmental causes. The problem, though, is that they're not doing that much to advance environmental causes. And so what you saw in that speech was the president taking credit for environmental accomplishments that were triggered by things that happened before his administration, things that have happened in spite of him, not because of him, such as legislation to protect water and air that was passed in the 70s and 80s, and also actions that were implemented by the Obama administration to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and protect the environment in other ways.
I was reading a little bit of the fact-checking that often goes after a Trump speech. Now, he'd said that the US has the best water quality in the world, and actually that was true. But then you have these high-profile cases like Flint, Michigan, which has been going on for so long and has never been addressed.
Well, certainly. I mean, one of the things about the United States being such a large country is that you can't make a blanket statement that says that the United States has the best water quality in the world. What water quality are you looking at? Certainly, you can point to some parts of the United States, especially those that are protected and that Trump can't get to, that have clean water. And then there are other parts that don't. One of the biggest problems with the Trump administration has been that even in cases where you can't roll back legislation, you can certainly decrease enforcement of it. So the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, which are two seminal pieces of environmental legislation in the United States, are still on the books, but the Trump administration is not doing a whole lot to enforce those, and without enforcement, the laws don't mean anything.
The biggest thing that the Trump administration obviously has done is to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. We can revisit that any number of times and point out the fact that everyone else is still on board, but the US isn't. Do we almost need to move beyond that now, except the fact that, yes, the US is out of it, the world has to carry on without the United States under that particular accord and move on almost?
Well, one thing that I mentioned when I was on a few hours ago is that even though the president has announced his intention to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement, that actually can't take effect until after the 2020 U.S. presidential election. So a lot hinges on that. If we see a different president take over and end the Trump administration, then we can hope that president will reverse that intention and will keep the United States in the Paris Climate Agreement for the long term. In the meantime, while Trump is still in office and not knowing whether or not he'll win re-election or be in office for another 4 years, it's critically important that other countries assume the baton of climate leadership and that states, the private sector, other influential entities that are not the federal U.S. government take up that baton for us here in the U.S. as well.
Hannah Safford, you've been very generous with your time for us today on Al Jazeera, and we thank you for that.
It's been a pleasure.